My name is Ken Randall, and Kellye Testy and I have started these monthly webinars for deans and others interested in legal education. We've called them Live with Kellye and Ken. And this is the third month that we're doing it. In August, from the meeting at SEALS, we discussed new ABA standards about admissions and online education. Then last month, we talked about the rule of law and why people should go to law school today. And then today we'll focus on entrepreneurialism in law schools. So let me turn it over to my co-host, Kellye Testy, former law school dean, former president of the AALS, and currently president and CEO of LSAC.
Thank you, Ken. I'm really happy to join all of you today. And I want to say a special thanks to the four deans for joining us. We're just so thrilled that you're here with us. This topic of the dean as entrepreneur is a wonderful one because there's so much innovation happening in legal education. And I know that all the candidates thinking about law school, either this coming year or in the future, are really interested to know what's happening out in our schools and how our schools adapting it is to changes in technology and other forces. So I want to say that today we're very pleased to welcome Dean Erwin Chemerinsky from Berkeley, Dean Douglas Sylvester from Arizona State University, Dean Laura Rosenbury from the University of Florida, and Dean James Hackney from Northeastern University School of Law. And Deans, I want to say a special thanks to you. I know your schedules are very busy. You have so much going on. We're thrilled you've joined us to talk a little bit about your role as an innovator and an entrepreneur in legal education. So what I'd like to do is to ask you to just begin by sharing some opening remarks about your efforts to innovate in your law schools, why you've been drawn to some of the initiatives you have, and what you see as the future for entrepreneurship and innovation in legal education. Let me ask Dean Chemerinsky to begin.
It's such an honor and pleasure to be part of the conversation. I'd want to draw a distinction between innovation and entrepreneurship. There are certainly entrepreneurial things that are innovative, but I also think there's a lot of things that are innovative that I wouldn't put under the category of entrepreneurship. So revising the first year curriculum to me is a very important thing to consider, but I wouldn't put that in the category of being entrepreneurial. What I would think about entrepreneurial is things that can be monetized. What things can we do as law schools that might help to generate revenue for the school? And if you want to talk more broadly, I'm glad to discuss innovation in a more general sense. I really see entrepreneurship as having a connotation as something that's going to generate revenue for my school. And to me, the goal is to try to do this in a way that furthers the educational mission of the school. Are there things that I can do as a dean to create programs that are good educationally and that will also generate revenue for the school? And I can give some examples of things that I've been part of that have failed and some that have succeeded. I remember when California adopted its requirement for mandatory continuing legal education. This was a while ago. I was a professor at the University of Southern California, and I and another professor and the dean thought this will be a great way to generate a lot of money for the law school by creating all of these CLE programs. It was a failure. The market was sufficiently glutted that we were never able to, in a major way, monetize that. Certain programs in particular areas were successful, but in terms of an overall effort of entrepreneurship, too many people were doing the same thing at the same time. On the other hand, one of the things that I created at UCI Law School and want to do at Berkeley is a summer program for high school students. That I think there's a real need to do much more in the way of civic education for high school students. I decided I wanted to do this as a non-residential program. I didn't want to have to worry about 17-year-olds in a dormitory, but I was able to create a one-week program where we brought in students from the area. It wasn't terribly expensive for them. We gave scholarships, but generated a fair amount of revenue at a relatively minimum amount of effort in really fulfilling the educational mission. I want to expand that here at Berkeley since they do have a residential program for high school students, and I think it's something that could serve our purposes. Another example of something that we've done at Berkeley is Berkeley has long had as part of its LLM program where students could come for 2 summers and get an LLM. But it's hard for professionals in other countries to get away for 2 summers. So one of the things we've created is a hybrid LLM program where they come for 1 summer and take courses online for the rest of what would be their educational program. It's off to a good start. This is just the second year, but it seems to me this is someplace where we can be entrepreneurial. We're also looking for opportunities that are more international. We have a legal studies major through our jurisprudence and social policy program in the law school, and we're creating a global studies program where students from other universities across the world can come for a semester and take courses in our undergraduate legal studies program. It furthers our educational mission, and yet it's something that's for us innovative and entrepreneurial. And we're always looking for distinctive continuing education programs where there is a market where we can perform a public mission in educating the bar, but also monetize it. So to me, being an entrepreneur as dean is I'm looking for revenue generating programs, but one's consistent with our educational mission.
Thank you so much, Dean Chemerinsky. And I want to say a special shout out for reaching out to high school students. So much of our research shows that people begin thinking about a legal education at least then. And so having that outreach will be very helpful in spreading more information about the opportunity of legal education. Dean Rosenbury, let me move to you and ask for your opening comments on this topic.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Kellye and Ken, for inviting me to participate today. It's a true honor. Unlike Erwin, I haven't had to explicitly focus on generating revenue from outside of the university. Instead, the University of Florida, after decades of neglecting the law school, is now ready to invest in us. So long as we can show a return on investment that will raise the national and international profile of the university as a whole. So yes, I'm being entrepreneurial, but it's within my institution as opposed to seeking outside revenue sources. And this task of raising the national and international profile is somewhat of a challenge because we are situated in the middle of north central Florida. We're about an hour from either coast, the Atlantic or the Gulf, and about 2 hours from any major city. So, Florida is the third largest state in the nation by population, yet we're somewhat hampered by our geography here in Gainesville. So to survive and to inspire the university to invest in us, we've had to think strategically about how to give our absolutely fantastic students access to the world and how to prepare them for the complex jobs of the future. So we've done so in multiple ways. One is by finding partners in Latin America to emphasize the connections between Florida and Latin America, and to bring those partners and our students to Miami at various points during the year, including a spring break course called Doing Business in Latin America. We've also gone to China. We have partners in China who are very interested in the intersection of law and business, particularly as Florida's economy and trading relationships with China grow. And so last year, we sent our students off to Shanghai and Beijing over spring break to do a Doing Business in China course. We've also developed a very robust semester and practice program for our students to leave Gainesville, go throughout the state and the country. That is not only helping our students with jobs, but it's also helping us generate revenue from alumni. And then finally, we have long had an international center for automated research that is very heavily endowed, but didn't have much traction after Westlaw and Lexis came into being. And so we're now using that money to transform our Legal Information Center, which is the largest in the Southeast. And we now have a great new director from the University of Texas, Jane McConnell. And to become a national leader in e-discovery education for both students and practitioners, which is generating some outside revenue, but more has these reputational effects. And then finally, in doing so, we're able to take advantage of our placement on this amazing campus, or the the state public flagship university. We have in particular a very strong engineering school, which is focused among other things in partnering with us on initiatives related to digital literacy, but also digital responsibility. As the world becomes transformed by technology, how do we ensure that it's used in a responsible way that does not perpetuate bias and that is also mindful of security and privacy concerns? So that is where my entrepreneurial hat is these days.
That's a lot, and congratulations. It's wonderful to hear that a university understands the law school being at the hub of so much innovation, and that's a great opportunity for those universities that seize it. So it's great to hear about. Dean Hackney, let me move to you. You know, you've had experience not only as dean, but also working in the president's office at Northeastern. What would you like to share on this opening topic?
Yeah, I'd like to emphasize what I refer to as an entrepreneurial mindset. So kind of thinking along the lines of Erwin's dichotomy between entrepreneurship and innovation. Yes, yeah, entrepreneurship also entails revenue creation, but also innovation as well. And I think the principal mindset shift that we need to go through as legal educators is to move away from thinking about our principal business or sole business being educating future lawyers to delivering legal education. And once we have that mindset shift, then I think a lot of kind of good things will happen in terms of both innovation as well as revenue.
Very good. Thank you so much. And Dean Sylvester, I had the pleasure of visiting your campus and was just thrilled to see so many great things happening there in an entrepreneurial spirit. What would you like to share as we begin this discussion?
Well, thanks again, Kellye and Ken, for having me on. After listening to Laura, I'm a little bitter because revenue is part of our life. So let me add to the idea of entrepreneurship a sense of risk. My haircut is a risk that didn't work, but obviously part of making entrepreneurship work is taking risks towards a particular goal. So what we've done here at the law school, and that I'm proud of, is take a lot of risks, some paying off and some not, but most of them really, again, as Erwin was suggesting, towards revenue. But I also want to point out taking risks to try and provide better opportunities for our students. So investing heavily, the ABA just granted us a separate location in Washington, D.C., so we can now spend a full year for our students in our Washington, D.C. center. We'll be moving into Los Angeles sometime in the next year and a half. The university has now taken over the Hearst Herald Examiner building. So it's this incredible facility that we'll be involved in LA. So these are opportunities that are opening up and expanding aspects of our students' experiences, but also where they can ultimately be placed. I was an innovation lawyer for the 2 seconds I was an attorney at Baker McKenzie. I happened to be there from '99 till about 2001, 2002, representing .coms. And so part of that risk is knowing that what you're looking for is where things are going. I'm Canadian, so Wayne Gretzky has a famous phrase of, you don't want to look where the puck is, you want to know where it's going. But I always like to suggest that if you're only looking where it's going, somebody's going to hip check you and kill you. So you have to keep your moments in front of you at the same time. So it's not just about taking risks and thinking about innovation, about where the world's going to be in 5 years, but really where our students need to be in 3 years and 10 months. And so we spend a lot of time here thinking about that as well. So for me, it's about taking risks, but also keeping an eye on what we're really in it for, which is where our students' outcomes will be.
Thank you so much. And I really appreciate how all of you are thinking about the students so much and helping them understand the opportunity of legal education, which is really so broad, so many directions that one can deploy a JD degree in terms of pursuing opportunity in law, business, innovation. Ken, I want to turn this back to you. I know you have some follow-up questions for the deans, and in that spirit, just open it up for further dialogue on these important topics.
Yeah, thank you, Kellye, and those are great openings. Hey, Doug, so I'll, first go back to you. When I think about the past decade, I've seen a real significant increase in both entrepreneurialism and in innovation the last 5, 6, 7 years. Now, some of that I think is linked with the downturn in interest in law schools, which, finally is coming back. Now that law schools are kind of getting back popular with young people, students, what impact do you think that will have on innovation entrepreneurialism? Can we keep that spirit going even as the JD marketplace bounces back?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be worried a little bit about the expansive market of legal education, that some schools might become a little more complacent where they're just looking at applications and bringing students in. I actually, as Erwin can also attest, being a dean and starting a career in 2011, not the best career choice I've ever made if I wanted to have a nice, easy life. So it was really entrepreneurship and, quite frankly, again, risk-taking innovation based on market requirements. But I think if you look back, the schools that have really done well over the last 8 years are the schools that really innovated and took risks focused on student outcomes and opportunities. So I'd like to think that those kinds of entrepreneurial aspects of law schools are going to continue to increase. I don't know that our students, even though they're more interested in law school, have become the kind of, how should we say it, uninterested data individuals that they were in 2007, 2008. I think they're really market savvy. So schools still have to be thinking, how am I going to provide an opportunity for these students that lets them take the risk of spending 3 years at law school? And so I'm still hopeful that most schools will take the right kinds of choices, focusing on student outcomes, increasing risks, not for students, increasing risks for opportunities. And so I think those things might really balance out.
Great, thanks. Laura, I see you're nodding your head some, so I think I'll use that as my cue to ask you to jump in on this question. Will we sustain the entrepreneurialism and the innovation that really has, fermented over the last several years?
I absolutely think we have to. I don't think the status quo will ever be an option again. And I was just thinking of something that one of my alumni shared with my law and leadership class a few weeks ago. The alumnus Cesar Alvarez, he was the CEO of Greenberg Traurig when it grew from 350 lawyers to 1,800 lawyers, and he's now the executive chairman of the firm. And he emphasized the following, that when you're doing legal practice, you have to, in order to serve your client, you have to be right most of the time. Like if you want to be right 80, 90, close to 100% of the time. And that does create some risk aversion in lawyers engaging in practice. But he said once he shifted to being the CEO of the firm, he realized that he had to have a much different risk profile, that he had to take more of a business mindset. And as long as he was right 65% of the time, he knew he was on the right track. And so he had to become much more comfortable with and tolerant of failure, because in order to innovate, he had to take many more risks than he would during practice. And I think that's something that my students really enjoyed hearing, and I wish my faculty were there.
Yeah, thanks. Hey, within the panel, first we have 4 very successful deans, different amounts of time that you've spent deaning. Dean Chemerinsky, I think you probably are the most senior of the panel. Doug may be close, but as you think about innovation or entrepreneurialism, has your view of that changed depending on whether you're a newer dean or a more senior dean? Does it get easier to innovate as time goes on?
Let me go to your earlier question, then try to address that one. For my school, and as a school I was previously at, JD tuition pays about 60% of our budget. That means I have to come up with the revenue for the other 40% of the budget. And costs are constantly going up, and tuition can't go up to match them. So I've got to find other ways to get that money. Some of it, of course, is by doing more in development, but some of it is what I think we're talking about here, entrepreneurship, trying to create revenue-generating programs that are consistent with the educational mission of my school. Now, I've been dean at 2 very different schools. From 2008 to 2017, I was the founding dean at University of California, Irvine School of Law. Everything there was about innovation. We had a blank slate. So when we talked about the first-year curriculum, I remember saying at the outset and over and again, we have to be sufficiently traditional to be credible and sufficiently innovative to justify why we exist. And having a blank slate is a wonderful opportunity for innovation, including entrepreneurial innovation. But now I'm dean at Berkeley, a school that's existed for a very long time, and we need to have innovation so as to deal with new developments in law and legal education. But we also need entrepreneurship because I've got to make up a 40% hole in revenue that the JD tuition doesn't cover. And I've got to constantly look for ways to do it in an ever more expensive market.
Thank you. Hey, James, Kellye mentioned that you recently spent time before coming back to the law school as chief of staff in the president's office. What light would you share with us on that aspect? Like, are law schools compared to other units on campus handling entrepreneurialism and innovation differently, or are all units pretty much the same from the perspective of central administration?
Well, I'd say that all units are pretty much the same from a Central University perspective in terms of certain expectations. However, law schools historically have been further removed from the university just by virtue of the fact that we don't engage generally in undergraduate education, which is such a huge part of kind of university life. Another aspect that we generally don't engage in as a unit is sponsored research. Again, that's changing a bit as well. And what I see is kind of post-2008 that law schools are beginning to engage in a lot of the activities that other colleges are as well. So there's kind of more of an integration. And to be perfectly frank, Central universities are paying more attention to law schools because frequently they're cutting a check in terms of the deficit or giving a break in terms of allocated costs.
Great, thanks. One of the things I've heard from deans around the country about some of the challenges, you may have some innovative ideas, entrepreneurial ideas, but there are hurdles, right, that can get in the way, and you're really busy people. You certainly have ABA standards that you have to comply with or seek a variance if you want to go beyond them. You may have a central administration, both at the council office as well as fiscal, within your own faculty and what you can navigate. So Laura, why don't we start with you? Give me an example maybe of some hurdles. What are the challenges? What are the greatest challenges? And what advice would you give to other deans about getting over those hurdles?
Well, first and foremost, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Oh, I love it.
But I think that's particularly hard for law school faculties to embrace. Because of the focus on deliberation and shared governance, oftentimes faculties want to discuss things until there's a nearly perfect solution in place. But by the time that happens, the problem has changed, has evolved, and the solution no longer pertains. So becoming more nimble and willing to try new things, even if it's not a perfect solution, is something that I've worked to embrace and try to encourage my faculty to embrace.
Thanks. Erwin, I saw you nodding your head, so I want to call on you.
Sure. It's interesting. I have found the largest obstacles to be in terms of campus bureaucracy. I can't think of anything that I've wanted to do, either Irvine or here, that ABA rules were an obstacle for. Certainly there's times you need to get ABA acquiescence, like if you want to create an LLM program, but it's never been, I can't think of a single thing I've wanted to do. I said, gosh, we can't because the ABA won't let us. Nor have I had this situation where either at Irvine or at Berkeley, the faculty was the obstacle. But the university bureaucracy is something else entirely. So if we want to create a self-supporting degree program, a new LLM program, a master's program, it's at least a 2-year process within the University of California. There are so many layers of bureaucracy within the campus and then getting university at the University of California approval level. It's a tremendous deterrent. And there's also within the University of California conflicting instructions and impulses. On the one hand, we're told by our chancellor and our provost, create revenue generating programs. We vitally need them. On the other hand, there's suspicion from like the academic senate at the campus and the university level that if it's primarily a revenue generating program, it's inconsistent with the educational mission of the university. And I can tell detailed stories of how difficult it's been to create some of these entrepreneurial programs that require university approval. So my focus, when possible, is to do the ones like certificate programs or like that I don't have to get university approval for.
Right. You sort of navigate on the periphery in places where you have the greatest jurisdiction.
Unless I don't have a choice. So if I want to expand in like creating the hybrid LLM program, that requires university approval. And then you just have to try to push it through as quickly as you can. But it takes a long time with a lot of obstacles in the University of California.
Yeah, thanks.
That's the benefit of being at a private.
Hey, so James, let me ask you about that. So you actually started entrepreneurial programs at Northeastern, then you went into the president's office, and now you're back as dean. Sometimes, dean through the central administration as sort of the hurdle trying to get over, and both you're pushed to do things, but, things are put in your place to block you. What advice would you give to deans from that experience of, say, 3 or 4 years at the president's level?
I'd say really work on finding those places of alignment with the Central University and including what the mindset is. I happen to be at a university that's very entrepreneurial and with a president that's always pushing us. So it would actually have the kind of opposite impact that Erwin is describing with his Central University. The ethos here is that the college deans should actually be pushing the Central University.
Okay, thanks. Doug, any insights on this? I mean, your school is known for a lot of new programs. Every year you start new MLS programs. You just mentioned the Washington initiative that I didn't know about. Have you faced hurdles? Which ones? How do you get over them?
Yeah, so this is where Laura might be jealous of us is, and I take a pay cut if I don't mention that ASU has been the most innovative university 4 years in a row. But that's important to understand. And one of the ways I think we've been extraordinarily lucky at this law school is to have a university that has systematically broken down these kinds of barriers to innovation. And so the law school, among other institutions that have been, I think, very innovative, has recently won a university-wide award for innovation in creating these rapid launch Masters of Legal Studies programs. We've grown that program from maybe 20 students in 2011 to about 400 now. And that is a big revenue generator for us, but we're also really, again, focused on the kinds of programs that students want to take that are going to advance their careers. So that's been really, I think, the best thing about being at Arizona State has been how quickly this university has shed the kinds of bureaucratic requirements necessary to have the kinds of innovations that really move an institution forward. So we're really lucky on that front.
Thank you. Hey, when it comes to within your own buildings and the execution, schools sometimes lack for leadership just because historically they've not hired entrepreneurs, they've not hired in these positions. And then when you start non-JD programs or innovative things, you can start with one person, but we're really talking about a broad skill set. So, Erwin, why don't you, again, as the most senior person, talk to us about staffing. How should a law school think about the staffing of entrepreneurial programs?
I think it's exactly what you say. It's crucial to hire the people of the skills for the task. Most law professors don't have those skills. Some might. And generally, if it's going to be a successful program, you're going to need a staff person who's not faculty. So we have here a Berkeley Center on Law and Business, which is tremendously entrepreneurial. We have a JD MBA who runs that program and does a great job with it. I can think of other instances where the idea was fine, but in order to implement it requires bringing somebody in who really has sophisticated knowledge and management skills. And as I think about my time as dean, sometimes I've succeeded in hiring those people. Sometimes I haven't. I can think of an instance where I had an idea for a program, but didn't have the right person to direct it, and the program never really got off the ground.
Yeah, thanks. And, sometimes I've had this conversation with newer deans. Sometimes I'll say, well, you're replacing yourself as the academic dean, and the first thing you have to do is hire a great person, second and, right hand and left hand. So, James, in a new deanship, I guess you're the newest dean. You've been in legal ed for a while. When you think about staffing these positions, and beyond staffing, but actual leadership and ownership, how do you think about the team that you pull together?
Well, yeah, I think to go back to Erwin's point, if you're thinking about entrepreneurial programs, it has to be someone who has that kind of mindset. And the difficult choice or the tension is, how do you blend that with the kind of academic setting and academic requirements, right? So there's kind of balancing act in terms of, I'll give a concrete example. So you have a new program, you think there's an expansive market, you have an idea of what the market would like to see in terms of that program, but then you have to run that through a curriculum committee. What does that look like? So that might require you to, on one hand, have the administrative staffing to be ready to ramp up, but also to set in place a curriculum committee that's going to be friendly and innovative in terms of a possible new program. So I think it's a kind of combination of looking at the staffing, looking at the governance structure, et cetera.
Okay. You know, Laura, sometimes we say if you want to get a job done, give it to a really busy person. So sometimes at law schools, what happens with these programs is, you know, the kind of the fallback position is that you give it to your right and left hand people who are already working 60 hours a week. So how do you juggle, you know, staffing things with people that you trust, but also developing the new talent for these programs?
Well, this has been a real challenge for me, and I welcome any advice. You know, we're very leanly staffed because our tuition is dramatically lower than I believe, you know, every other school represented here, with the exception of maybe Alabama. And so I don't have the luxury of being able to hire new people, but I very much relate to the need for someone to take ownership of new projects. If you just add it to someone's existing plate, unless they're a very special person, it's not going to create the ownership that's demanded of a new project. To get something off the ground requires incredible enthusiasm, savvy, and strategy. So since I haven't been able to hire new staff people, I've been leaning more on my business school, who is extremely entrepreneurial. Comparison to us, and they've been extremely helpful. And then I've also asked my fellow deans and others for advice, including you, Ken, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you. Hey, Doug, I want to take us in a little bit different direction, and I want to talk a little bit about failure or about risk. And I know Laura talked about not waiting to have a perfect program. I've spent time talking to the head of your online programs, you know, who says every year, we try a couple new programs a year. I'll talk to him about market research, and he'll say, no, we're just going to throw it out and try. So, you know, give us your ideas about risk, you know, risk mitigation, risk tolerance, and even failure. You know, we learn a lot from failure. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so I know you've talked to Eric Menkes, like some others. It's a JD, MBA, engineering degree who runs that program for me. Ran our Innovation Advancement Clinic for years before sort of taking on this role. So we kind of made a choice, like many I think here have, is that delay is probably the single greatest way to ensure failure every single time. Yep. So our decision was we could engage in market research over and over and over again. And what we would end up doing is losing a lot of the victories we might have by just ensuring that we were going to win. So our choice really is that we move forward really quickly, really from idea to launch is often 3 months. When we get a new degree out into the marketplace and we can start enrolling students for the next semester, it's usually a 60 to 90 day period. And so you can't do market research. So what we do is we rely on our own market data. We know when students come in and apply to us what they're interested in doing. And sometimes they do lament that we don't have a program in X or in Y. We also have the ability to look around the 5th largest city in the United States here and see where expansion is happening, and know that if we added a degree in that area or a concentration or a program, we could automatically put it out there and figure out whether students are coming. And the key to that is we don't invest a ton beyond our own marketing communications. You know, to answer the prior question too, just to get something out there, one of the things we've done extraordinarily different than most law schools is we don't have a curriculum committee, James. we basically got rid of all faculty committees other than appointments and tenure and promotion about 10 years ago. And we still have faculty governance, we still have faculty meetings, but it does, getting rid of those kinds of speed bumps allow you to move quickly enough and at a less amount of political cost as well to really get these things out. So our failures are many, but they are often not deeply expensive. They are not existential for us. They are quick hits, and within 2 years we go, this one's not working, let's let it go. And we've launched 6 more in that same period. And if 3 or 4 of them are hitting it large, that works. We're like an investment banker in that sense. So
Yeah.
Now everybody's jealous.
Yeah, no, well.
Yeah. Hey, Doug, so do you act as a committee of the whole on curriculum matters and that's
yeah, so, you know, I know Erwin said it too, and we're all going to agree, is that not all faculty, in fact, no faculty were hired to be good administrators, and not all faculty are. And so one of the things that not having these committees has allowed us to do is taking members of the faculty, putting them into associate dean positions. We're the ones that come up with curricular reform ideas. We're the ones that come up with ways of changing admissions, and we present them to the faculty. We get a lot of feedback. We make changes to ensure that the faculty are on board. But ultimately, we don't have these kinds of lockstep faculty idea generation policies that really slow you down.
Yeah, thank you.
And if I could add just one thing there too, from my experience, is that you'll often find too that a recent graduate is often well situated to help you with the launch of something innovative. You know, they may have come out of another field and also themselves experience the desire for a particular program like Doug was mentioning, and that can be a great way to involve a recent grad in building their own portfolio and also get some help in launching some new things.
Yep. Hey, Erwin, you mentioned that when you were a faculty member before you were a dean, you mentioned one program that didn't really work, the market was saturated. You're such a successful dean, but during your 2 deanships, is there something that went amiss that you could share that experience with other people, you know, some broad organizing principle?
Oh, I can give you lots of examples of failures. I'll mention one. I had the idea that we could create an Institute for Corporate Counsel at UCI, that there was really going to be a market for people who were in-house counsel, and we could do a series of programs for them. I hired somebody to run the program. We came up with great ideas. We had an advisory board of people in the role, and then no one signed up for the course. We tried different marketing, and no one signed up for it. And ultimately, we realized there wasn't a demand for what we were trying to put out there. It was an investment. It was an affordable investment. But sometimes you just discover that despite all of your best efforts, initial research and the like, it's just not going to work. And then you move on and try something else. The only thing I'd add in terms of the prior comment, having been a faculty member at a number of schools before becoming a dean, and a dean at 2 schools, the culture of institutions varies enormously. I've been at institutions where the faculty didn't want to be very involved in faculty governance, and institutions most recently where the faculty very much want to be involved. I can see schools where you can get rid of committees and schools where any attempt by the dean to get rid of committees would be the end of that deanship. And so whatever we do has to be consistent with the culture of the institution that we're a part of.
Thanks. Thank you, Erwin. That's really insightful. Hey, James, do you have experiences from either before, you know, your prior time at the law school or since, where you would say, boy, this is the best lesson I learned, and it was something actually that didn't work, but you know, you failed. Anything that you could share, some, you know, maybe someone else avoid those potholes?
In terms of failure, yeah. I mean, for example, we tried some certificate programs. Again, it's the same idea that Doug put out there. You try them, you see kind of what works. And one of the principal lessons is to not look away from failure and also be willing to destroy. That's to say that you have to be willing to get rid of and do away with programs that actually aren't successful, as opposed to holding on and building up on failure.
Great, thanks. Laura, any insights on this, you know, if I knew then what I know now kind of question?
Well, I think change management is as Erwin says, unique to every institution, but also must be in the forefront of your mind, even with an institution that might seem receptive to change. Change can be hard, and thinking ahead of time about how to message change and how to assure people that they are still valued, even if they aren't part of the new initiative, is absolutely key.
Thanks. You know, before we close, I at least have one more formal question, then I guess we'll let everyone just wrap up a little bit. And that's about the ABA. So, you know, unlike other disciplines, there's only one accrediting body for law schools that's been licensed by the DOE. I personally am a fan of the section of legal ed. I mean, I think that with a small amount of resources, they do a lot. You know, I think the current consultant managing director, Barry Kerr, has a lot of technology experience. Bill Adams, if you call him, and you know, you have a question, he's, you know, I think it's very transparent, but is there anything that if you were making recommendations to the ABA, James, why don't we start with you? Anything, you know, ABA has a lot of standards about JD programs and innovating within JD. It's a pretty much hands off when it comes to non-JD, as long as they're not impacting, you know, the JD program. But is there anything, if you could change any standards, that would help facilitate innovation?
Yeah, I would just say continue in terms of the online standards and providing greater flexibility. I know one way of looking at it from a regulatory perspective is that they've been relaxing the standards, and law schools actually haven't kind of taken up the charge or opportunity in terms of a lot of the online content. But I think if they would just go further in terms of allowing more freedom, there could be more innovation.
Great, thanks. Erwin, you haven't faced any ABA challenges? It sounded like, you know, everything you've tried to do has been within those standards pretty easily.
I mean, of course, we were creating a new law school at UCI, so we were very attentive to wanting to meet the ABA standards. But I found remarkable congruence between what we would want to do to be an excellent law school and what the ABA was requiring also. So we wanted to have a very high bar pass rate, and the ABA wants you to have a high bar pass rate. We wanted to have the majority of our courses taught by our full-time faculty, and the ABA wants the majority of your courses taught by the full-time faculty. The ABA says you have to have a minimum number of classroom hours. The University of California requires even more with regard to classroom hours. We obviously had to go through, I think, 6 different site visits in our first 8 years. And I don't have living in-laws, but I always felt that was sort of what I heard about in-laws was you're happy to see them come and even happier to see them go.
Right.
We had to do that. I think that the key question with regard to the ABA is, what are we trying to achieve through ABA regulation of law schools? My own answer to that is, what we want is a minimum assurance of quality. We don't want the market to be the sole way that we determine quality of law schools. So there was a proposal to decrease the amount that full-time faculty would have to teach as an ABA rule. I strongly oppose that change, because I think if we're going to be making sure there's quality, we should make sure that full-time faculty are teaching a certain amount. I would favor allowing more innovation, but so long as it's consistent with the ABA mission of ensuring high-quality education, no matter where somebody goes, if it's an ABA accredited school.
Thank you. Laura, anything on what the ABA might do, or anything else that might facilitate? So instead of, you know, hurdles that are being put up, anything that might facilitate innovation, entrepreneurialism?
Well, I continue to think about how the ABA requires law schools to report employment outcomes. You know, this is something I've been thinking about for the past 1.5 years. I'm partnering with Bo Rutledge from the University of Georgia. And what I'm increasingly concerned about is the continuing distinction between legal and non-legal jobs. I think high quality legal education can now lead to really complex and interesting jobs in non-law firm settings. For instance, the best tax law jobs are now with the Big 4 accounting firms. And I don't think the ABA has kept up with that evolution of the legal market, and I would like the ABA to begin to think about how to acknowledge the fluidity between legal and non-legal jobs. The non-legal jobs now might be some of the best jobs our students want to aspire too.
Right. Great. Yeah, great insight. Appreciate that. Doug, any final thing left on ABA or ways to facilitate anything from a regulatory standpoint?
Yeah, I'm generally a pretty big fan of the ABA. I can see some of the dangers in the market when they relax oversight a little too much. We've had some experience here in Arizona on that. So, my main advice to the ABA would be two things: move more quickly. And I think both to take action when problems are obviously arising, and secondly, to allow schools that are non-problematic to experiment a little bit more. This process to get our DC program approved as a separate location took quite a while. And so it wasn't just a time period. The last piece I'd say is get the ABA more on board with technology. Having to fly up in person with 3 people to do a statement on something seems a little bit of overkill. It could have been done by a letter, could have been done, I don't know, like this. And that would strike me as a pretty good way to reduce costs and move more quickly. I know those are difficult things, but those would be my main suggestions.
Thanks. Thank you. Just as we gave you a few minutes at the beginning for a couple opening comments, why don't we end doing the same thing? Any final thoughts or insights or things that you think we didn't cover? James, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I'd just say that entrepreneurship and innovation, I think it's actually really fun and can really get you jazzed up as a dean. I kind of started out in that space as an associate dean, building up a program. I did some related work at Central in terms of, we have a bunch of distributed campuses at Northeastern and kind of helping establish some new programs in those other campuses from a Central University perspective. And I just think it's an aspect of what we can do as academic leaders that's just really interesting and engaging.
Great, great. Wonderful. Thank you. Erwin, any final words of wisdom?
I don't think we have any choice but to be entrepreneurial. It's just the nature of legal education now and for the foreseeable future. I think the only thing that I would add compared to all the wonderful comments that we've heard is the importance of a dean in taking advantage of the resources that are there to help advise and implement. So when I came to Berkeley, one of the first things I did was ask a prior dean, Chris Adley, to chair a committee on revenue generating programs to come up with new ideas for revenue generation. I've relied very much on our advisory board, our alumni board, to talk with them about where do they see opportunities in the market where the law school can provide something that isn't now being provided, but that can also generate a profit for us. Lawyers in the community are often the best advisors with regard to that. I think the chance to learn from other deans and other law schools what they're doing that we're not, that we might be able to profit from. And so I think we have to look for all of the ideas we can and then try to find the right people to implement them.
Great, thank you. Great comments. Doug, any final words?
Yeah, I mean, entrepreneurship and innovation isn't just about new programs. I think one thing we haven't talked about that I'm extraordinarily proud of is how we've really changed admissions. So really focusing on students and speed. I know other schools are really doing that a lot as well. But, I joke, I went to the University of Buffalo. I'm still waiting for my rejection from Yale from '91. It is time. So I think the idea that we give students information, where are you in the process? What are the likelihood we're going to let you in? I think that's the kind of innovation that would make the entire process a little bit simpler. And the last thing I'd really suggest to all new deans is when you find talent, keep it. We've been really lucky here at the law school to be able to keep almost all my staff, Kellye, thanks so much. But generally speaking, we've been really good at retaining people. And that's a big part of how you really move things forward is you find good people and you make sure they're happy and you keep them around you.
Yep, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Laura, final comments, insights?
Well, I agree that all law school deans are now entrepreneurs and must be entrepreneurs. Innovation pervades every aspect of our job. There's no part of being a dean that's set apart from or immune from innovation. But given the constant need to think ahead, to take risks, it can be a lonely job. And I have found much comfort effort and my fellow deans, and I thank all of you who have helped me as I've learned how to manage change, and I look forward to seeing what everyone creates in this new and exciting world.
Thank you. Well, I've enjoyed the dialogue greatly. Kellye, I want to turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Ken, and thanks to all the deans. What great comments that you have. And I want to start with a comment to you and all of our dean colleagues by just saying how much we appreciate all the effort that you're going through to make legal education so exciting and to encourage candidates to come into this profession that needs their voices and needs their own innovation and entrepreneurial spirits. And so, deans, please know that we're here to help you with technology needs, data needs, whatever it might be, and that we're always grateful for the way that you're advancing legal education. I also want to take a minute to just give a note to our candidates who are watching today and who will watch, because what you'll find in our law schools throughout the United States is just such a great quality of legal education. The programs that we heard today from Florida, from Arizona, from Berkeley, from Northeastern are amazing, and these deans are terrific at leading their work in entrepreneurial ways. You'll find deep quality throughout America's law schools, and you'll find an openness to wanting to help you find your own pathway to succeed in law. And so for all of you who are thinking about law school, know that you'll find a great opportunity in these and other law schools throughout the U.S. And thank you all for being with us today. Ken, back to you.
Good. Well, thank you. We've enjoyed this greatly. We'll send a notice out soon, the second Monday in December. We're going to have the next live with Kellye and Ken on the subject of diversity and inclusion. But that concludes today's program. Have a great afternoon and evening. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.